Hello again, everyone. Welcome to our third official retail e-commerce COVID-19 updates. My name is Marvin Fernandez, and I am our Senior Partner Manager here at NetElixir. First and foremost, before we get started, we hope that everyone joining us today on the call, along with their friends and family, are safe during these uncertain times. I know these are unprecedented times, so we hope we're all taking the right precautions. We are going to get started on our COVID-19 outbreak discussion and how this event is reshaping how our customers are buying online. I will start off with a quick agenda on the topics that we will be discussing. I'll go through quickly on a quick introduction on who NetElixir is, who we are, and what we do, the impact of COVID-19 on inspirational gifting industries, some research overviews, the impact of COVID-19 on online shopper behavior, along with the impact on e-commerce sales. We'll go through some of the Google ad investments and the changes that we've been seeing, along with their cost per clicks, some advice for retail marketers, and without further ado, also our Q&A with today's retail superhero, UPS. So here at NetElixir, we help retail brands find and acquire new high-value customers online. Our number one goal is to help brands own the search bar, and we have several solutions that are included in that package, ranging from paid search and shopping, search engine optimization, social media marketing, Amazon marketing services, analytics consulting, along with e-commerce development services. We did want to highlight a few of our partners, starting with our UPS Ready partnership and along being in our customer technology program as well. We are a premier partner of Google, a select partner of Microsoft or Bing, and our Facebook marketing partner as well. Right below that, we have a handful of our clients here that range anywhere between food to fashion. So in today's call, we are privileged to have Gerard Gibbons, the UPS President of Small Business and US Marketing, along with our founder and CEO, Udayan and Bose, who will be taking us today through today's webinars. So with that, I will pause. I will pass it over to Udayan and have him do a quick introduction as well.
Thank you very much, Marv. Hello, everyone. Again, I echo the same statement which Marv started with. I really hope you and your loved ones are staying safe and well in these very uncertain times. I have to start by very clearly mentioning, that this outbreak is first and foremost a human tragedy, which is affecting hundreds of thousands of people. And with lives at risk, we just hope that the conditions improve quickly. The outbreak is also having a growing impact on the global economy. This presentation essentially is intended to provide the retail industry leaders with a perspective on the evolving situation within the United States and the implications for their company's marketing programs. As all of us know, the outbreak is moving rather quickly, and some of the perspectives in our presentation may fall rapidly out of date. This presentation is based on the first-hand e-commerce sales data for a select data set of online retailers that we are lucky to work with and serve as of April 4th, 2020. We will continue to closely track the category-level shopper insights and e-commerce sales data to identify any significant trends that may emerge as the outbreak really evolves. A couple of things I really wanted to mention and highlight out here. As I have stated earlier, this is a huge human tragedy. And at this point in time, such critical times, we prefer not to share any point of view or opinions. Our attempt is to share real e-commerce data and the shopper behavior data as such that we collect using our tool, NetElixir Insights, and essentially allow our attendees to form their own opinions for their business. And hopefully, using the data and using some indicators and indicative trends, hopefully they'll be able to plan better. Of course, we'll be sharing a lot of data and a lot of insights. If you have any questions, please feel free to add your questions in the Q&A box or even in the chat bar. We'll try to, at the end of the presentation, try to address as many questions as we potentially can. But I think the focus out here in our presentation, like it always has been, we would rather be able to share any real data and data again for the customer data set that we have considered and stay away from any opinions. And also, we would try to not make any assumptions behind any of these because your businesses are very unique and you probably would know the best about that. So with that, let me start off the presentation by first of all, those of you who are celebrating Easter, wish you all a very happy Easter. And those of you who are celebrating Passover, wish you all a happy Passover. We felt, just given the time of this webinar, the bi-weekly webinar that we are doing, as many of our guests who are joining us today, they are celebrating Easter or Passover. We wanted to start with some insights about the inspirational gifting industry, and we wanted to share some of the insights as to how COVID-19 outbreak has really fundamentally shifted some of the consumer behavior, as well as really sort of reshaped the industry, or is reshaping the industry. The first part, as you can see, just let me explain this graph really quick. So this is essentially a year-on-year, day-wise orders and site visits for all of our inspiration gifting class customers that we are working with. And for those customers, as you can see, the red line indicates the percentage year-on-year increase in visits. So as you can see, the increase in visits is not as much. More or less, it has stayed flat. What really has changed is the number of orders almost on a daily basis. And very specifically, if you really look at, we try to identify as to when did the orders see such a massive spike. And as you can see, the date roughly was around 15th or 16th of March. And since then, the orders really have, on an aggregate for the month of March, has really exceeded, the conversion rate has really exceeded 90% compared to what it used to be the same dates last year. So we are really looking at something which is massive, which can fundamentally transform the complete industry, and which probably is. Now, talking about the transformation, I think one of the things which also is very, very apparent that we really, when we sort of dive in, we try to understand as to who are, what exactly are the forces which are driving these changes. So one, people are buying a lot quicker, but at the same time, we try to analyze as to who are the new shoppers who are really coming ahead and really making the purchases. And what we came up with was this. We have been amazed, pleasantly so, with the amount of compassion and love which is flowing during these times. Especially if you really look at Gen Z, very specifically the age group 18 to 24, and the millennials, the age group 25 to 34, we are seeing a huge percentage of new user growth in both these segments. So the orange bar essentially highlights the overall percentage of new users. This is actually a numerical number. So we literally physically counted how many new users actually came from this particular user group and compared it with previous year. And the 18 to 24, which comprised last year 4% of the overall new user mix, which the sites were getting, that has really doubled to 8%. So, I mean, this probably is to an extent indicative of a couple of things which we are observing on a fairly regular basis. We see a lot of grandkids giving out gifts to their grandparents. We are seeing a lot of children really send gifts or share gifts with their parents. And overall, I think it's just that an amazing amount of one of the good parts, if I were to take about this terrible outbreak, has been it is very clearly we are seeing sort of families come closer together. And when with the higher infusion of millennials and the Gen Z into the new order mix, we are also seeing some fundamental shift in how people essentially search, shop, and buy. So these are the 4 date ranges for which we have compared latency. Latency is the time between the first time a new visitor really landed on the website to the time they made the first purchase. While the percentage of paths ending with mobile is, we have tracked using our tool individual paths, only 3% or 2% of the paths really convert into a purchase or end in a purchase, but the remainder 98% do not end in a purchase. So we really wanted to track what are the percentage of the paths which are ending with a last click coming from the mobile device. As you can see, 2 very interesting stats. Latency becomes important. It shows, again, this is all new users or new customers. They are converting at a lot quicker pace. So earlier it used to be about 37 hours between the first time they landed on the website and then they purchased. And that has already come down to about 27 hours now, which is, as you can admit, is a pretty substantial drop in the overall latency. In terms of percentage of paths ending with mobile also is probably understandable, because Gen Z and millennials prefer to really do their search, shop, buy behavior a lot more compared to the other demographic segments using their mobile phones, which has really led to the percentage of overall buyer paths or shopper paths really or even visitor paths really ending with mobile going up from 27% to 45%. Again, a massive shift there as well. Then we wanted to find out as to where exactly, what geography or what region within the US is driving this huge growth for the purchase and gifting of the inspirational gifts. Not too much of a surprise, I would say. As you can see, South is definitely leading the rest of the country in terms of the percentage of e-commerce sales for this particular segment, inspirational gifts, followed very closely by Midwest. Interestingly and incidentally, the percentage growth year on year for Midwest in terms of just purely the new users has been the highest. I know I have been emphasizing a lot in the new user side in this part. There were a couple of reasons for that. The first reason was the new user, and we very specifically tracked who were directly coming in without really typing essentially any particular keyword. We were directly seeing a lot of the new users effectively really going ahead and engaging in greater amount of online shopping. But we were also seeing that the new users did not really follow any particular pattern and probably may not really have as much of a brand loyalty as an existing user. So that was, I think, one of the things which we really observed in this entire process. So again, any questions that anyone may have, I would love to really address them at the end, but feel free to really sort of ask me and add any questions that you have in the Q&A box. So that was the overall level of search. So what we were trying to sort of do at the NetElixir Retail Intelligence Lab, as we call it, we tried to say is, are we really looking at fundamentally the entire COVID-19 outbreak, fundamentally changing how really customers really evaluate and purchase products? So we were really trying to get into slightly more theoretical basis, and where we really found this entire pyramid, which was defined by Bain and Company, to be exceptionally helpful. So Bain and Company came up with this model, loosely extended from the Maslow's hierarchy, which they call the elements of the customer value pyramid. Now, typically, as we all know, that when customers really evaluate a product or a service, they really weigh its perceived value, or why should they buy, against the price that they are willing to pay for it. Now, what we believe is this pandemic may fundamentally be changing the shape of this pyramid for different categories. Just to give you an understanding as to very simple terms as to how this pyramid may apply for your category, let us say we talked about the inspirational gifting category, right? So inspirational gifting, if you really break down to the value elements, the first one, what we found in the inspirational gifting is there is definitely an intent to reduce anxiety. And the second one also, there is obviously a very clear intent to provide hope. So if you combine these two, are probably two sample value elements which are top of the mind for the consumer when they are going ahead and engaging in a purchase or making a purchase essentially from any one of the inspirational gift sites as such. Now, on the other hand, if you really look at some of the other elements out here, right? So, for example, one of the things can be affiliation and belonging. The other one can be really fun and entertainment. Just because the COVID-19 is forcing certain restrictions on how we really lead the daily life, some of these elements probably have diminished quite significantly in terms of importance. Not just because I don't want to, but probably I cannot. So that is, I think, one of the things which really we firmly believe that every marketer should really very clearly be focused on and trying to keep a tab on for their particular industry, and how are these elements really changing in this so-called the new normal, which still I wouldn't say is the new normal because every day is different in this situation. But as the new normal really evolves, how do these elements, or what is the role that each one of the elements really sort of plays, or what is the weightage you really would want to assign to each one of these value elements? Now, what we are seeing, and the reason why we believe so, is just fundamentally because the coronavirus is a black swan event. Now, the concept of black swan theory, or the theory of black swans, essentially was first proposed by Nassim Nicholas Taleb in his book Fooled by Randomness in 2001. And he described the black swan event as an event which, first of all, comes as a surprise. I don't think anyone would disagree that the coronavirus really outbreak and the magnitude of it really hit everyone by a surprise. Has a major effect, obviously. And the last but not the least, we'll see as to when it sort of stops, where people start rationalizing that we should probably have known this, or we should probably have seen this. But net, And the unfortunate reality is probably shared in this particular graph, which shows that exponential impact of this quite terrible disease, which is happening, which is having on the entire society. So the question that we were sort of posing as marketers, or we would like to sort of fundamentally pose to the marketers, are three. The first one is, how is COVID-19 outbreak redefining the consumer value pyramid across categories, or your category specifically? Right? What are the elements? Are there some of the elements which have become more important compared to the others? Are some of the elements which have forever basically vanished until and unless the new normal sort of happens? The second question is, will this crisis lead to permanent shifts in consumer behavior? For example, I think all of us are using a lot more hand sanitizers now, or washing our hands a lot more now, right? Hand sanitizer for most of us used to be probably an afterthought, only when to be used in certain locations. Now, on an average, probably we are using hand sanitizers anywhere between 20 to 100 times a day. Now, from that perspective, will this eventually lead to a permanent shift in consumer behavior? Or for example, let us say we are seeing, because of the unfortunate closing of the retail store locations, a lot of people who used to actually go to the stores nearby and make purchases, they have shifted to online. And the fundamental question is, once the crisis sort of ends, which it will, at that point in time, do the consumers again move back to offline, or do they still continue to do online, and offline also gets added in? So does online really sort of get a bigger share? One of the things I'm pretty sure, with a lot of retailers joining us today, would be top of the mind is, we are somehow, just how the existence has been and probably will be, at least for the next month or so, we are all confined, and we are, I mean, in fact, we have a hashtag. The hashtag is stay at home. Now, will that fundamentally change our behavior? Will it almost dissuade us probably to go in crowded places? What does it really mean in terms of a shopping environment? What does it mean in terms of, let us say, an overall entertainment environment? So all of these things is something which I think it's important for marketers to keep a tab on all the information, and really try to make their own opinions, or at least sort of do a little bit of a future casting of their own for their respective businesses or categories, which is what I think is an important component when you put the last question in this particular slide, which is, what should I do as a marketer to really adapt to the new normal? Again, any questions, please feel free to sort of put them on the chat box. We'll be taking all the questions, I mean, as much as we can at the end of the presentation. So talking a little bit about the research. So as I have emphasized earlier, I mean, we wanted to, from the beginning, I mean, we were the first ones to really come up with doing a real data-based research on this one. Our first webinar was done on the 11th of March, and so much has changed since then, right? Almost a month back. So we really wanted to focus on the real data. And as I mentioned, not really make any assumptions or put our opinions on this one. Just sort of put some questions and the data. So so we tried to really essentially adopt a very simple process, or a thought process. When we were doing the research, we said that what is the most fundamental thing that this particular outbreak is likely to impact? And the most fundamental thing was the online shopper behavior, right? How people behave, or the consumer behavior, let us say. Fundamentally, the outbreak would have had the maximum impact on the online shopper behavior, right? So I think we wanted to, first of all, track the online shopper behavior changes. And for that, we came up with just two simple metrics: latency, which we have discussed earlier, conversion rates, which we have discussed earlier as well. Are people converting at a faster pace or a higher rate, and are people converting faster? So in terms of between the first landing on the website to the purchase, again, for new visitors, so that there is no, we are absolutely removing any bias which may be created by, let us say, returning visitors just because they know the brand. We are really looking at the new visitors only. And when the online shopper behavior, if the conversion rates are changing, and if the latency, let us say, is coming down, how would it really impact in terms of e-commerce sales or online sales? What is the impact on the actual dollar revenue? So we, rather than taking the dollar revenue, we really went for two metrics. The first one was the number of online orders, and we also wanted to focus on what is the percentage of new orders. So online orders, of course, was a good indicator of as to are more transactions really happening online, and percentage new orders primarily because, as I mentioned, that's a good gauge that may there be a possibility that a lot of the in-store shoppers or retail store shoppers may be actually moving there or moving online and making those purchases, and how big of an impact are they really having? And last but not the least, since we are a specialist retail focused digital marketing firm, we really had to focus on the Google ad investment. So we tracked two metrics. One was we were able to track on an industry basis what was the year-on-year increase or decrease in the cost per clicks. And the second one was where marketers really increasing their spend or slashing their spend during this outbreak, and as this outbreak really continues. So just to quickly sort of summarize some of the key pointers in the research, we segregated the entire research period for this particular webinar, and we do these webinars every 2 weeks. Our next webinar is coming up on the 23rd of April. The first period that we selected was the 9th of Feb to the 22nd of Feb. And this was what we are calling the beginning. This was the time when Seattle had just a few cases and the number of cases in Seattle grew. Period 2 was when the real first spike really started to happen, again in the Seattle, the Washington area. New York probably had the first case around the end of Feb, beginning of March. And that's when the first break, the period 3 started, when the outbreak really spread. So between 8th of March and the 21st of March, there were a lot of government advisories which came out, which requested to people to really stay at home. And that was, I think, fundamentally also, and we'll discuss it later, and we have some data to show that fundamentally was a very important transition point where a lot of the shopper behavior moved from making purchases offline at stores to moving online. And we have some data to prove that point. The last period, which is the most recent period, was 22nd of March to basically 4th of April. This was the time, actually, if you really look at the 50 states, and we have a few states which still are not under lockdown, but the states which declared a lockdown, about 70% of all the lockdowns, and you can really search the lockdown dates by state on Google and sort of come up with this thing, and because there's the Wikipedia section page which you can really sort of brief to. But about 70% of all the government lockdowns really, or the store lockdowns, the business lockdowns really happened during that period. A lot of store closings in the New York area, the Northeast primarily happened during the third period. So just wanted to keep that in perspective because we'll refer back to that again later. We compared daily data from basically 2020 to 2019 over these 4 time periods. And the retail categories we considered for our research: apparel, home decor, tools and hardware, food, gifting, pet supply, and home furnishings. And last but not the least, I've mentioned it a couple of times earlier, we are lucky that we have been able to build a proprietary technology, which is our real-time customer analytics platform. So we are able to track a lot of the consumer behavior and the shifts in the consumer behavior, the delta essentially, using our platform on a real-time basis. So with that, let me jump on to the impact of COVID-19 on the online shopper behavior. Again, we'll sort of follow the same sequence. Let us start to see what is the impact that this particular crisis has around people, or how shoppers shop. That would lead to what is the impact on the e-commerce sales, and finally, how exactly are marketers or advertisers really responding to all of these shifts and higher increase in e-commerce sales, or lower decrease in e-commerce sales. So the first part, again, may not be too much of a surprise. The new shoppers are spending less time to complete a purchase. So again, very, very specific, very similar to what we saw during the inspirational gifting industry. So people are spending less time between the first time they ever land on a website to the time they make the first purchase. Again, a very important indicator, because that really shows as to what is the urgency level of these new shoppers. Secondly, it also shows how much of confidence the new shopper really is willing to place on the website, so that she is able to pull out her credit card and really spend money. So both very important part. The second part, which is essentially the shoppers, the speed at which they are really pulling out the credit card and making the purchase, also is very clearly linked by the strength of the brand under consideration. So if you have a stronger brand, the latency comes down. And if the brand is not as familiar, or the shopper is not as familiar as she may be with a larger brand, she takes a little longer as such. So again, there is a very fundamental argument for marketers to invest in building their brands, so that people really have more confidence, especially the new shoppers have more confidence. Moving on, we'll get into the conversion rate, and conversion rate, I think the food category, I think we have discussed in our previous 2 webinars as well, that the food category really has seen dramatic increases in conversion rates. And specifically, if you were to note the date, as you can see, this is roughly around 4th or 5th of March is when the spikes really started. So the red line is the conversion rates on a day-to-day basis in 2019. The blue line is the day-to-day conversion rate in 2020. And as you can see, the conversion rate, for example, a date like the 5th of April, just about 3-4 days back, essentially went up to about 8.3% or 8.5%. And last year, the same time was roughly about 2.5%, right? So it's almost like almost a 3 to 3.5 times jump in terms of conversion rate. And if you really plot the entire area, you would see that the overall conversion rates are through the roof. So we tried to find out the conversion rates across categories, and we found that across categories, interestingly, it was not just food, but across categories, the average conversion rate, this is March 2020. Again, I'm just talking about the customer data set that we have considered for our research. These are companies or retailers with annual e-commerce revenue of $20 million to $300 million. And typically they have been clustered or grouped into about these 7 different segments. And the average conversion rate in March as well. So as you can see, with the exception of apparel, each and every category, the conversion rates went up. Now, again, these are indicative numbers for just our customer data set. What I think I would request all of you to observe is what is the percentage increase from what it was in 2019 to 2018. And then really probably see as to, are you seeing a very similar impact for your website or for your e-commerce site as such? Moving on, we wanted to track the impact of COVID-19 on the e-commerce sales per se. Now, e-commerce sales, we have seen that there are 2 things that very clearly we have observed. The first one, we saw that people are taking less time, or new buyers are taking less time to complete a purchase, right? And the second thing that we saw, the conversion rates almost across all categories, with the exception of apparel, went up quite substantially. So how is it impacting e-commerce sales? Now, I think it's probably, it doesn't really take a rocket scientist to understand that obviously e-commerce sales have gone up, but how much? So let me start with a couple of recent news items which came out. Now, this came out just about last week, where the company Commerce IQ analyzed 5,000 products on Amazon for 50 categories. And as you can see, the overall increase or the jump was quite exponential. Then another piece of article essentially came out on the April 6th, where this is essentially the headline taken from, I believe, USA Today. The Wayfair stock prices skyrocketed 41% after saying that the revenue doubled in March as coronavirus drove online furniture shopping. Now that itself is quite unique, right? Furniture shopping doubled for a company which is quite huge like Wayfair, says that typically a lot of people still, despite the pandemic and despite the crisis, they still are making those purchases online. Not only making those purchases, they are purchasing substantially higher compared to what they did the same time last year and the same month last year as well. So moving on very specifically, this is where we get to our data set. So in our data set, as you can see, the yellow line, which is essentially is reflective of the actual increase, the year-on-year increase in the number of e-commerce orders, very specifically in the most recent time period. Out of the 4 time periods, this is the most recent time period, which was 22nd of March to the 4th of April. And as you can see in the food category, for all the customers that we are working with on an aggregate basis, we are experiencing a 580%. Yes, I repeat that, 580% increase in a year-on-year order, that time frame 2020 compared to that time frame 2019. Incredible. If you really look at gifting, again, we have discussed this earlier, 80% year-on-year increase. Home furnishings is lesser, but again, it has been a slow starter. Home furnishing is growing roughly about 20-25%. Home decor less so. Pet supplies more, probably close to about 50 or 60%. Hardware and tools is growing also at a substantial pace as well. Now, the interesting part in this entire trend is, this trend, if you really look at period by period, it is progressively increasing. So which makes us believe that more and more people are essentially shifting or transitioning to online sales during these times. And it's quite amazing to see, if you really now think of this in the construct of the customer value pyramid that we have discussed, what are the elements which are not just more important, but is there a sequence of preference, let us say, for the customers when you talk about the consumer value elements, which a potential shopper is likely to have in their mind as she gets adjusted into this new normal. So once she is getting adjusted to the new normal, is the potential shopper likely to really go ahead and sort of act at a certain pace? So moving on to this one, we then wanted to also see, this is those of you who attended our webinar on the 26th of March would remember that we tried to, based on the data that we had seen for our data set, again, the data set was $20 million to $300 million e-commerce revenue. We tried to come up with what would be the forecasts for online orders, how much will they increase or decrease in the month of April. So these are the forecasts, and the actual numbers interestingly show that we have been significantly conservative in our forecast. It sounds absolutely ridiculous, with the exception of apparel, which is declining at a fairly fast pace. If you look at food, 430% increase just in the first 6 days of the month, 74% increase for gifting, home furnishing 32%, and so on. So the year-on-year growth that we are actually what we had projected, we seem to have made a very conservative projection. We never expected that level of spike only in the first 6 days of April. In certain cases, I mean, this spike has become triple-digit numbers, as you can see in the food industry. So moving on, another part that we saw, which was fairly unchanged, was the percentage of new shopper orders. So what was the percentage of all new orders, all orders which were being contributed by the new shoppers? The only interesting part in this one is mentioned in the second bullet. So effectively, if you look at it, I mean, what it mentions is based on the analysis that we have done on the data, most categories actually had the highest percentage of brick and mortar store shoppers switch to online shopping during the third period, which was 8th of March and 22nd of March. Now, this was the time when most of the state governments were rolling out the overall advisories for their people. We fundamentally believe these 2 weeks, which is 8th of March, 22nd of March, or 21st of March, may get counted as some of the most important weeks for US e-commerce ever. These were the 2 weeks when probably a lot of the consumer behaviors really shifted, or really a huge percentage of consumers really shifted from the retail offline store ways to online purchases during this time. My last part of the segment is, what was the impact of COVID-19 on Google ad investments in CPC? So again, we started with shopper behavior leading to a higher e-commerce sales, higher conversion rates, and so on. And then how exactly are marketers, and since we specialize in search marketing, we wanted to see as to how are search marketers responding to this really a new burst of or growth which has been exhibited across the categories in retail shopping or online retail. The most important and the interesting part observation was, if you look at the cost per clicks for most categories are in constant decline. And when we analyzed, we found that for each and every category, there were fewer advertisers per category. The number of advertisers competing for a particular keyword across categories has gone down by 10% to as much as 30%. So earlier, if there were, let us say, when I say 30%, if there were 10 advertisers, now there are probably 7 advertisers. Earlier, there were 10 advertisers, there are 9 advertisers. Because cost per click or the entire pay-per-click model works directly on how many, basically the demand supply, how many competitors are competing for a keyword. As a result of it, the cost per clicks also came down. Now, what we had thought for some reason that marketers would be more focused on keeping a tab on the actual conversion rates and numbers, and we may maybe be a little more aggressive in terms of their spend. However, so far, all the data that we have captured doesn't really confirm or affirm that particular hypothesis that we have. And as a result of it, you would see all the yellow bars across categories. Each and every category is a negative. In the food category, the cost per clicks are down by 40%, which is enormous. We wanted to also check as to, are marketers spending more on Google and Bing, again, that are the top two, the paid search engines. And we saw in certain cases, the marketers again fall into about three segments. The first segment is the marketers who really focus on the real-time data insights. And they are able to keep a track, and they really found out that there is a big opportunity to win new customers and new shoppers at this point in time. So they said, why don't we go ahead and spend more? As long as you are able to get me a certain X ROI, keep spending. And as a result of it, in certain categories like food or even gifting or even hardware and tools, we saw substantial bumps in the last 2-week period in terms of the overall online spend. The second category of marketers are still on the fence because they have to really look at the overall business operational issues. And they said, let us take a stock of the situation. We understand there is an opportunity, but there are certain immediate important matters that we really need to fix first before we really sort of go ahead and spending more on ads. That was the second segment. And the third segment, for some reason, unfortunately, is just making assumptions and listening to the point of view and the opinions. So my request and my call out for all those marketers who are not really relying on actual real data and just sort of focusing on assumptions, please take a look at the actual numbers, and then do not miss out on this opportunity that you have to really win new customers at a phenomenally low cost per acquisition. We have not really seen such low CPCs for certain categories as much as in about 10 or 12 years. Please do not let this time really pass by, primarily because that's the opportunity, and the time frame would be fairly short-lived, because more and more advertisers, once they realize this, they start looking at real data. They would definitely come in, thereby raising the cost per clicks. So that's what we had in terms of the observations. I'll just end with a few pieces of advice for the retail marketers. The first one, I think it goes without saying that things are changing on a daily basis. Be nimble. Without being nimble, you can't really put a tab on any shifts in buyer behavior and online sales. You really have to constantly keep on adapting. You really cannot really base your judgment based on assumptions. You cannot really you have to really focus on the real actual data to really make any business plans, even on a short-term basis. The second one, of course, goes without saying, please intensify the focus on your existing customers. Your existing customers really form the backbone of your company. How can you earn a higher share of engagement from these customers? How can you really help them during these uncertain times? Do not really avoid focusing on winning new customers. As I mentioned, across categories, whether it is the big news article on Wayfair or Amazon or our research, we have very clear data to prove that there is a massive shift of buyers going from retail shopping or in-store shopping onto online shopping due to an unfortunate closing of a lot of the retail store locations. So as long as you are cognizant of the fact for your business, it is probably the best time. Again, I use the best time with a little bit of a reluctance, just because that overall timing obviously is of grave concern for the humanity. I don't want to be in any way minimizing the importance of that. But at the same time, for e-commerce marketers, retailers, there has never been a time where you can really win so many new customers for so less. And last but not the least, review the 4 P's of marketing constantly. What categories and SKUs will you focus on? And this keeps on shifting constantly. Can you really offer an incentive for your new customers? Does a differential pricing strategy make sense? And what is the most optimal channel mix? Now, I know we have a lot of retail marketers out here. We have a lot of our friends from UPS and other companies, other partners who have joined us. So those are some of the advice. We would really appreciate your help in spreading that. We'll be more than happy to jump on conversations call with any one of you having any questions on this one. We'll also be addressing some of the questions that you have asked or posed at the end of the session. But without further ado, I really want to sort of move on to my next segment. Next segment is we started this segment during our last webinar on the 26th of March. I think it's very important for us to recognize and realize that during these difficult times, there are some companies who are going above and beyond to ensure that normalcy is maintained in our lives. We acknowledge with tremendous amount of humility the contributions of such companies in our segment. We call them the retail superheroes. And I'm very, very proud and excited to present the retail superhero of the month of April is UPS. We have the privilege of having UPS's president of SMB and US Marketing, Gerard Gibbons, join us today for a discussion on how UPS is leading the way during the pandemic that is really affecting billions of lives across the world. Gerard, on behalf of my entire NetElixir team, a big welcome to our webinar.
Great. So hey, thank you for that introduction. And I want to start by recognizing the UPSers on the front line. So our package operations, hub and feeder operations, those that work in the UPS airline, those are the folks that are on the front line of this pandemic, making sure that people get the essential household products they need to live, work from home, or go to school from home, and all in the process of through this pandemic. So those are the real heroes, the folks on the front line. And this coronavirus is forcing all individuals and businesses to really adapt to a new reality.
Thank you, Gerard. So when you talk about the new reality, what are some of the challenges that UPS has been experiencing or has had to deal with so far? And how exactly is UPS dealing with these challenges?
So let me just say, for me personally, and I'm sure like a lot of folks on this call, I've had to work or adjust to working from home, creating office space, engaging with coworkers solely through video and audio conference calls. My children are in the home, they're doing school from home, and my spouse is also here working as well. So it's obviously unprecedented, and it's created some unique challenges and opportunities at the same time. For UPS, prioritizing the safety and health of our employees has been our number one priority because we care about each other, we care about our families, we care about the communities where we live and work. And as I believe UPS has been designated by governments around the world as a critical infrastructure business. And we have both the privilege and the responsibility to continue working safely during this challenging period. So we've amped up communication. We've got a series of communications for our employees around recommended behaviors to manage health risks. We've instituted new hygiene protocols and social distancing suggested by the CDC and the World Health Organization. We've stepped up our efforts to disinfect our facilities, equipment, and package cars. We've even adjusted how we handle signature required packages because we saw early on in some of our social media posts that customers were concerned about taking possession of the driver's diet board and making signatures. So we've made some changes there. We're also ensuring that all of our employees take the proper precautions that include frequent hand washing, staying at home if they feel sick, in order to prevent spreading the virus. And I think it's critical to emphasize that UPS will keep delivering for our customers through the end of this crisis. We recognize that it's been challenging time for our customers, really unprecedented. No playbook for what's happening, but we're taking steps to help our customers through this crisis. We've done over 1,400 what we call 15-minute virtual supply chain consultations to help small and mid-sized businesses adapt to the new reality and adjust their supply chains. We offer solutions like UPS My Choice for Business, which enable firms to have greater visibility for their incoming and outgoing shipments in a centralized, easy-to-use platform. We've also, enabled customers to pick up and drop off packages from UPS access points as well as the UPS store. And then we've got a really great online promotion where customers can enjoy 15% off ground, 35% off air, and 40% off of their international shipments to make it simplified and easier for customers to access UPS.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Gerard. Again, a big hat tip from all of us, I think, who are joining here and more for all the efforts of UPS. Now, our entire thesis of this particular presentation of a big theme is the consumer behavior and the shopper behavior. What are some of the fundamental key changes that you may have observed during these times in essentially how businesses as well as the shoppers are I wouldn't say behaving, but probably responding to this entire crisis, or maybe any fundamental changes in the shopper behavior or the business behavior?
Yeah, so I'd say we've seen a lot of what you've already outlined in your discussion. So a significant demand for delivery to residential addresses. As you can imagine, with the number of states that have instituted shelter-in-place directives, more and more people are working from home or they're doing school from home. And so this has driven demand for what we call the stay-at-home economy. And companies in those categories that you talked about are really leaning in and using UPS to get their packages delivered to more and more residential addresses. And I'd say, how we're responding to the shifts. So UPS has, thousands of operations and logistics professionals that are experienced with adapting to changing conditions and managing through the crisis. And we've got some really good contingency plans to ensure that we keep business moving.
Fantastic. Thank you, Gerard. My next question to you, Gerard, would be, I think all know that UPS has always had an enormous focus on giving back to the community, to the society at large. Can you share some of the initiatives which UPS has been doing during this COVID-19 outbreak?
Yeah, so through the UPS Foundation, we're really focused on humanitarian efforts, and we've donated more than $6 million in grants for in-kind transportation, supply chain consultation, in collaboration with over a dozen organizations that provide relief and support. We've also worked with the United Nations agencies and other humanitarian relief partners to support through this crisis. We've provided more than 4 million respirator masks or delivered 11,000 protective suits and 280,000 gloves to healthcare workers. And we also are managing 25 chartered flights for FEMA that will carry more than 3 million pounds of materials, which is equivalent to about 14 full 747 freighters. And this cargo includes, masks, surgical gowns, gloves, medical swabs, and thermometers. And as I mentioned, we've been designated as an essential business by the White House Rapid Response Task Force for the coronavirus, and we're also supporting with some of the testing sites.
Very interesting. Thank you, Gerard. What may be some of the learnings that you have had during this crisis? I'm pretty sure every crisis like this, or any crisis for that matter, comes up with a learning, but an event which doesn't have a precedent like this obviously has multiple learnings. What would be the top 3 learnings, let us say, if you were to distill down, that UPS have had, or maybe you have had, leading the SMB team at UPS?
So I'd say one, key learning is this crisis has reinforced how critical digital solutions are for our customers, particularly small and mid-sized businesses. And we saw this shift taking place already with businesses selling more online, engaging in multi-channel selling, and aligning with digital partners to help, manage critical areas of their business. I believe the current COVID crisis has accelerated the trend. More and more brick and mortar businesses are being forced into the digital space, whether it means selling online or communicating differently through other channels with their customers. And we're fortunate that we have this partnership that we have with NetElixir and a number of other partners that help business owners work through these types of issues and help them manage and survive, and in some cases thrive in this crisis and beyond into what hopefully becomes back to normal very soon. And I also want to point out that we've got a number of solutions to support customers as they navigate through the COVID crisis and beyond. Solutions like e-fulfillment and Where2Go that basically enable small and mid-sized businesses to sell on multiple online channels without having to worry about warehousing, pick and packing, and shipping orders. So it's a very innovative and creative solution to help small and mid-sized businesses.
Thank you, Gerard. I believe UPS has already come up with a very specific page as well, which I really wanted to call out as well. is basically to support the small businesses during the coronavirus crisis, what Gerard mentions about. My last question to you, Gerard, would be, we have many retail executives who have joined us today. What would be your advice for them for the next few weeks, let us say, as the outbreak continues to spread?
So hopefully this starts to wind down soon, and we move back to normal or as close to normal as possible. But my advice would be, focus on cash management, focus on being resilient, reimagine what's possible, and have a written recovery plan as we start to come out of this current crisis. And then I want to reiterate that UPS has been a long and trusted partner to businesses and communities around the world, and we're there to support and act as a partner of choice for small and mid-sized businesses. And we've made some significant investments over the last year and a half to really enable small businesses to punch above their weight class. So investments in accelerating our ground through some significant improvements in time in transit, along with weekend services that we plan to roll out. And then, maybe as a last point, UPS remains committed to using our resources and expertise to help governments around the world, healthcare organizations, and small and mid-sized businesses manage through this crisis.
Thank you very much, Gerard. It was absolutely a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your insights. I think on the behalf of everyone that has been touched by UPS, which probably is everyone, I really wanted to express our gratitude to you and all the UPSers for the incredible work. Thank you very much again, Gerard. We will pass it on to Marv now. Marvik, and maybe you can sort of wrap up, and then we can just open up for questions. I think we may have time for about 2 or 3 questions, but Marvik, off to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gerard and Udayan, and a big thank you also to the UPS team, especially on the front line, for also being our retail superhero. Udayan also did mention that UPS is doing a lot of work on the small business front, along with supporting businesses during the coronavirus pandemic. So there is this website that they have in place that you could visit. If you go to ups.com, click on their services tab, followed by the Knowledge Center, they have a wealth of resources that customers could take advantage of to learn a little bit more of how they are dealing with this impact as well. Before we do jump into, I know we have a slew of questions, so if you do have any more questions, you could please put them into the chat box. There are quite a bit. We will get to a few. I know with time coming up to wrap up. But one piece before we jump into that is just what NetElixir is doing to help and really geared towards small businesses. We've put together a team to help support those retailers who have had to close shop during COVID-19. And this program is solely dedicated to helping those businesses that had to close their brick and mortar locations or have had a lot of B2B customers that now have to focus their shift onto B2C, but giving them the opportunity to sell online. Our team is geared to helping get you guys back up and running in only 10 days with a fully functioning e-commerce website. This could be leveraged through the UPS partnership as well in their CTP program. But if you have any more questions about that, you feel free to reach us at netelixir.com/moveyourbusinessonline, or reach out directly to us as well. And in continuing with the knowledge sharing that we have and everything that has been happening in the retail e-commerce world, our team is dedicating blogs every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at netelixir.com/blog, where we'll continue to keep you guys updated on the retail analytics side of things. And in continuing our webinar, we are having our next webinar on April 23rd. And it's the same link that you guys used to register here, netelixir.com/COVID-19. And our team will push out an invitation to you to block your calendars, and we really hope to see you there. And lastly, I know we covered a lot of insights on today's calls. We had a couple questions come in regarding some specific insights, but if we don't get a chance to get to those, if you could just email us at shareinsights@netelixir.com. We will gladly send over some information to you that highlights the specific verticals and category-specific insights that you are looking for. Let's jump into some questions. I know we had a question come in. If okay, I will start with you, Gerard. a question on the UPS front that came in is, due to the spike, how is UPS operationally handling the massive demand and spike in shipping through e-commerce sales?
So, as I mentioned initially, our service levels are best they've really ever been, and so we are focused on ensuring that our employees are available, and that we are continuing to focus on providing the highest quality of service to all UPS customers. And so, we've got a number of solutions that are really designed to help customers navigate through this challenge. UPS My Choice is a great way to have greater visibility to your packages. You can select an alternative delivery if you're not going to be home, or if you don't want somebody to deliver it to your residence. We have My Choice for Business, so for those small businesses that want greater visibility and control. So basically leveraging all of our technology, innovation, and investments and expertise to ensure that we provide the highest quality of service to our customers at this time.
Awesome. Thank you, Gerard. And we have time for one more question, and this question is geared towards you, Dave. Do you expect the CPC to continue to decline?
That's a difficult question. I know we have our search engine friends join us on this one, Marv. Given the signs that we have seen, I think there are certain challenges which probably are influencing fewer number of advertisers advertising on Google and Bing. One is some of the plants, unfortunately, have had to be closed down just because of the restrictions and the lockdown. And unless and until they can really come back live, obviously they would not be advertising. Given as to how the situation really unfolds in the month of April, a lot would really be determined by that. But as of now, from whatever we have seen, and based on the state of the outbreak and the impact it is having, I would probably think that the CPCs may not further decline. But it's already at a pretty low level compared to as we have seen that every week progressively. But I think we are pretty much at the lowest ebb. As I mentioned, CPCs for something like food industry is minus 40% and so on. I think from here, maybe within the next couple of weeks, once the lockdowns are slowly lifted, we can see them to go up. But for this month, I would think, yeah, it will be negative, but whether it will go down further, it's really difficult for me to comment. I would probably want to say no, just given the current circumstance and situation.
Awesome. Thank you,
That was a
Dan.
difficult question. Thank you.
Perfect. I know we are at time, and I know we have several questions. Please feel free to reach us at shareinsights@netelixir.com that we could answer, or our team could also reach out to you with some specific questions that you had. I know there were some specific questions around for the UPS team as well, so I could continue to pass those over to Gerard. But I wanted to wrap up and say thank you, everyone, so much for taking the time to join us today. We continue to say, be safe, stay healthy, and take the precautions as you can. But again, thank you from the NetElixir team. Thank you so much for the UPS team for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks a lot. Gerard, thank you.
Thank you.